Excellent. Right, cool. So thanks for joining me. I'm going to get this screen shared. Share my screen. There we go. That one. And there we go. So I'm going to get a few disclaimers out there. I'm still getting used to streaming live. That's one disclaimer. I've got a few more. Today, we've probably got a mix of a few people. We've got people who come from my photography workshops and stuff like that and follow me on there. And we've also got people coming over from the local area and maybe social media who are interested in the issues that have been facing Sun Lane, which is just on the edge of the village where I live, and we'll be talking about that. So what today is about sharing some of the photographs from that, and also looking at the wildlife, the issues, and what's happening. I'm not going to be sort of going over it from a photographic point of view, I guess is what I'm saying. So I do try and share a bit of photographic stuff. I might share a little bit as we go along, but it's primarily about the wildlife and the nature and the conservation of this area. There'll be species that I haven't included on here, and I know it's a much more diverse picture than I'm putting out there, but you guys have got to get on with your Sunday lunch, so I can't go over all the species that we'll look at. So if I miss out one of your favorite species, it might be because I haven't got time. It might be because I haven't got a photograph of it. So apologies if I miss species that you're particularly keen on in the area. Also, another disclaimer is we may get interrupted by a dog or two kids, and if it sounds like there's a sort of riot going on downstairs, I promise you it's all good. Just go with it; they'll be fine. And that's my disclaimers out the way. I will talk about a little bit about my approach as we go along, because what I don't want to do is get people going in and shoving their heads in nests and stuff like that. So all the photographs that I've taken today have been very sensitively photographed. I very rarely, in fact, I never approach wildlife. I wait for it to approach me. So it's very important that we don't, especially at this time where there's nesting and breeding going on, that we don't go disrupting the nature and wildlife. So that's what we're about. So let's get started. As I said, I can't see the comments and stuff that's going on. I'm still trying to get my head around streaming on Facebook and stuff. So I can't see your questions. If you do have questions, put comments on underneath. I might be able to answer photographic wildlife ones. I will give you a brief outline about what's going on with the situation. That hopefully there'll be people who are watching who might be able to have more technical understanding of the legal situation with this. But to just give you an idea, this is the area. So if you are in the know and you can comment underneath, that would be great. And at the end of the video later on today, I'll answer any comments and stuff that you write underneath for you. This is the area. So this is Burley and Wharfdale, the houses in the background there, and you can see this these green fields in front of us are the area that are lined up for development. Now the development has been going on for a long time. We managed to stop it. The residents and the community managed to stop it. It got rejected, the plans for it, and in recent weeks it was overruled. An appeal from the developing company overruled it, and this development of 500 homes is going to be going ahead. And what I wanted to do is just highlight here. So the red area is where the homes are going to be built. And there's some real key issues. But from my point of view, probably the key issues are this barn owl nest that is right on the edge there, the nest box there, right on the edge. And then we've also got common toads that breed in this pool of water here. Now, I imagine that this area that we're looking at will become a problem for those common toads when you start putting roads in and houses and stuff like that. So those are my key things, but there's obviously a lot of other things which I'll highlight as we go through. But that's one of the key areas of my concern. And just to give you an idea of where I've taken all these photographs from as I take you on this photo tour. Now, over on the right-hand side is public footpaths. And there's a little red dot as well towards the left, which is the edge of the field boundary where there's a public road as well. To the left is private property and a private driveway, which I had permission to go to. So please don't go down there. It's private. You need permission to go there. So that's just to give you an idea of where I've been taking these photographs from. And now I'll give you a bit of a tour of the area of Sun Lane, and I'm going to start with the borders, working away around the outside and show you those borders, because the borders are important, yeah, because they're a habitat in themselves, and they separate other habitats as well. So they're this kind of key sort of area where if you muck around with either side of those borders, it's going to affect on, you know, they're interconnected, yeah. So you know, what happens on one side will affect the other side of the border. And I want to just have a little walk around these borders and share with you some of the wildlife and some of the things that we see around those edges as we go around. So you will see that on some parts of the borders, they're quite urban, quite suburban, lots of paths, street lights, things like that, you know, modern amenities, if you like. And the other parts of the borders are much more rural with country tracks. This is a track that divides the fields and the development site from the Sun Lane Nature Reserve, and looks very beautiful at any time of year. You can see from whether it's winter or whether it's spring or summer, and you get some beautiful blossoms. And in the autumn, this kind of mishmash, it's a great border. It's really full of a diverse range of vegetation and plants, and produces lots of fruits and foods and habitats and nesting areas for all sorts of wildlife. And it really does look stunning all year round. Lots of flora as well to enjoy, lots of different species, and even in areas where it's kind of feels kind of urban and suburban, there's still bursting and erupting with life and different flowers and pollinations, and when it's allowed to overgrow like this, it's just fantastic for insects and pollinators, which is just, you know, such a fundamental part of the ecology of an area. You know, it starts with the plants and the insects and builds up from there. And this really is the foundation and the building block of the wildlife. And so I'm always sort of encouraging people to keep as many dandelions as you can, because they're early, they come out early, and they're just such a valuable resource for things like bees and butterflies. And you know, it does feel like a jungle when you start looking into this border surrounding the area. It really does feel like this kind of jungle that you're exploring, and it must do for the animals that inhabit it as well. A really kind of exciting environment to explore. And we have these sort of areas of woodlands as well, or feels like a woodland, not necessarily a woodland, but you kind of have this kind of stretch with trees, and you get these plants like wood anemones, and you also just get lots of different colors and garlic and the bluebells, and there's a mix of, you know, indigenous plants and not so indigenous plants, but I'm not really fussy about that. You do get people that are a bit, oh, this shouldn't be here or there. I love the mix, the mashup of all the different things that you can see around this whole border. It's really quite eclectic, and it's a really great thing to explore. And this is a scene that's not too far away, with loads of blossoms erupting all over the place, which obviously is good for pollinators and early bees, and come out loads of bumblebees. Enjoy this hedgerow and this border. Now, this is a tawny mining bee, and the solitary bee. So there's 270 species of bee in the UK, and 250 of them are solitary bees. And they're really, really efficient pollinators. You know, they're actually more efficient pollinators than bumblebees, bumblebees and honeybees, sorry, because even though the honeybees have their sort of clusters, their hives, so that there's more of them. But in terms of per bee, solitary bees are much more efficient at pollinating plants and flowers and stuff. So it's a really important habitat for these solitary bees, and they need trees and environments where they can burrow and nest in and build their chambers. And they're a really valuable part of the ecosystem. And one butterfly that you might, it's usually this is one of my favorites, the comma. It's usually the first butterfly I see and the last butterfly I see in the area, because they quite often are hibernate, and you'll see them on a warm day. They might sort of stir and come out. I saw one this week actually, and I just love the shape of them and the color of them. They're stunning. And one of the early butterflies to emerge, and all too short a window, is the orange top at the tip. I absolutely love them. They're really stunning, and they're really you know, for me, quite an iconic species of sun lane. Actually, I often see them around the borders. Speckled word, and the cabbage white. I think people call them a large white. Now, I know gardeners aren't so keen on these large whites, but you know, the thing is the more natural habitat we have for things like large whites, the less they are in your garden as well. So you know, there's still an argument to have these areas where these guys can breed and see. This isn't on anyone's tomato plant or whatever plants they go on. I'm not a gardener, but I know they can be a bit of a nemesis for the gardeners, those. And you can get some more colourful butterflies like the peacock, which are absolutely exquisite to look at. Really beautiful colours, and the red admiral as well, which is stunning, often along the hedgerows. And obviously, where there's insects and butterflies and things, you get birds that are chasing them and feeding them to their young. And it's hard to get more iconic than a robin. A beautiful song, really stunning to listen to and to look at as well. Really, really lovely looking bird, and really, you know, very iconic, I think, the robin, especially in England. And one of the nuthatch song is quite remarkable. When you hear them, they sound like, to me, like a sort of a gun off Star Trek, or one of the old cheap production ones of Star Trek. Well, I'm not going to do it. I can't do impressions because it's embarrassing, but they're really extraordinary sound, and they come around the trees, and they're really quite a cool bird. This is a young fledgling actually, just on the gatepost that goes into the fields, which I'll show you in a bit. And yeah, they're really cool. They're quite iconic to Sun Lane for me. I really like nuthatches. And all around those borders, there's all sorts, loads of birds breeding and nesting and bringing up their young and fledglings, and they'll be gathering their food from all over the place, from gardens to the nature reserve, and including the fields where this development is happening. And as well as our resident birds, like the blue, that was a blue tip fledgling, by the way, and the robin, we get visitors like chiffchaffs and warblers as well, a great array, and they're really great to see coming over from Africa and places like that. And it's not just in the spring. We get the lesser redpoll, usually seen here in the winter as well, which takes off the saplings and the seed heads and stuff like that. Then they're really great to see as well. Goldfinches, more colourful visitor. They're really great to see feeding around the reserve, and you can see them in the fields as well, actually. So especially on the long grass edges, or where the fields have been left to go a bit what's the word? I can't think of the word. I don't want to say scrappy, but you know, where the ground's been left to grow a little bit, they'll be hitting the seeds and stuff around there. And in terms of colourful birds, this is a world-class bird. It's a bullfinch. A really stunning bird to watch and see, and quite a unique call as well. I'm not going to do these impressions, and there's nothing more striking than the blue feathers of a jay, and I managed to collect a couple from the Sun Lane area where they've dropped on the floor, and they're really special treasures to find when you find a jay feather. Really beautiful bird. And of course, actually, with the jay, they're really quite important birds, because in the autumn time they'll store acorns and store them underground, and the acorns that they don't find over winter, or they leave, or they don't need, or they forget about, they will turn into trees and stuff. So if they're forgotten about and left, the jays can be a really good source of reforestation for areas, and really good from that point of view. And moving away from the sort of colourful birds, even our brown and sort of nondescript birds are really special. The small wren, brown wren, really loud voice. So you'll hear that if you're walking around Sun Lane, the side of this area, and actually on any side you'll hear the wren. It's a really powerful song and a really beautiful bird to see. And one of my favorite, we call them little brown jobs, I guess, I think they're called, and well, I know they're called that, but I always think that's a little bit unfair. But the tree creeper will sort of spiral around trees, digging out insects and grubs from underneath the bark, and you can see the holes there, and here's one jumping up a bark with its beak full of exciting food that is foraged or hunted. And yeah, great tree creepers, really cool. And in terms of little brown jobs, they don't get much more exciting than a tree sparrow. A tree sparrow was in a lot of trouble with real declines, and there's only a few areas where it's sort of held its ground, and Sun Lane is a really important site for tree sparrows. And you can tell the tree sparrow because they have this sort of chestnut brown, very brown head, and they do breed in the area. So this is a really important site for tree sparrows. We also have house sparrows, and you can tell the difference there. I think there's quite a striking difference, but predominantly the grey forehead there is how you tell the difference. And even though they're called house sparrows, they do actually nest in our hedges, which is great, and or the hedges of this area. And you can see them all around the whole border of this property. You can see the house sparrows there. Another bird that nests in the hedgerows and in these borders is the long-tailed tit, which is one of my favourite. There's something I really love about the long-tailed tits, and there's something about their character and their charisma that I just absolutely love. Here's one here. Do you know what? I just remember all these every single shot. I remember the story of each one, and this one is actually a jay around here, and this, you can see the wings are up and the tail's up. It's alarmed. It's actually building a nest, and there's a jay in the area, and it's very worried about how close that is. And here you go, you can see a nest here, which is great. These nests are made out of spider webs, so they're nice and flexible, and they put moss and lichen, and you can see the sort of attention that goes into building that tiny little bit of lichen there, and webbing, going in to a dome like nest with a tiny hole that it will go in and line with like hundreds of thousands of feathers, so it's nice and soft. What a nest that is for the long-tailed tits. And the young aren't quite as cute and as as the older ones, I don't think, but they're still pretty cool, and they quite often see them around the Sun Lane area with their beaks agape asking for some food. They're quite noisy as well. So we're gonna, as we sort of transition into the what's the word, the sort of the inner, the field areas as well. There's obviously a lot of birds that sort of interchange between the borders and the fields of the area as well. And the magpie is one of them, and this one with a short tail. And the magpie is a stunner, especially with those reflective kind of iridescent feathers there. And you can see it bringing up back some nest material over those fields. A wood pigeon, underappreciated bird, I think, quite common, but it's still a beautiful user of this site and area. And the collar dove, another bird I have a soft spot for. I really love the collar dove. Now, the collar dove in the 50s was, it wasn't a UK resident. And when the first collar dove appeared in the UK, people drove from miles across the country to see these collar doves. And it just shows you how, I always find it interesting how we appreciate different wildlife quite often for its rarity. And you know, over 50, you know, well, 70 years on, we're kind of very much used to seeing these, but 70 years ago, this was, you know, a big thing, and people were coming and blocking roads and all sorts to see collar doves. So it shows you how our perspectives and thoughts on wildlife can change over time as well. And as I said earlier, this site is the actual Sunlane Nature Reserve, is a breeding area for common toads. So all around that whole area will be migration paths, there's be hunting grounds, and there'll be areas where these common toads disperse into and travel across hunting and getting on with their lives, and then coming back each spring. And now is the time for the toads to be coming up. So, you know, if you are, keep an eye out for them, especially if you see them on the roads, and if you can do safely, if you see some toads or even frogs crossing these roads, give them a helping hand, because they do struggle with sort of human roads and things that we've built in that block their path. There's another one getting a ride. So let's look into this field area, and this is the gate that I was talking about, where you can look in from the other side, seeing the fields and the areas, the surrounding area. Now, I think the other key thing to point out about this site where it's being developed, one of the reasons it's successful is because it's not an overworked land, and it's quite a relaxed environment within this boundary, within these fields, where the house, it's not overgrazed, it's not heavily worked, and it's become a haven for wildlife as a result. Now, in Burley and Wharfdale, this development will shift Burley and Wharfdale to the west, and Ilkley to the west. On the other side of this greenbelt has actually just put planning in for an extension of housing block to Ilkley's east. So what's happening is we're putting more and more pressure on the greenbelt within those two communities and towns, and the more you do that, I guess the harder that land's going to be worked, and the more wildlife is going to be pushed out into those areas. So that's something that, well, it's just something that struck me anyway. But as we look into this area, just to give you an idea of how this sort of, these housing developments encroach and put more and more pressure on a smaller space of land, smaller area. And here's actually quite a recent photo in the snowfields, in the fields covered in snow this year, in fact. And we're going to be losing a fair amount of trees, I think it's fair to say, within those fields. They're not too big fields as well. That's what's quite nice, quite small fields. And it's great when you get a good frosty morning in those areas and you get that low sunlight. And you can see that each field has its own character as well, which is great. They're not this uniform. They're not very flattened, and there really is a mosaic of different kind of habitats for different wildlife to enjoy. And here you can see the grass has been allowed to grow, and it just looks stunning. It's beautiful when you allow that grass and those flower meadows to grow. And I've read books like by naturalists like Richard Jefferies, and books that were written again 70 odd years ago, and you read these descriptions of these fields where plumes of butterflies and stuff, and this is the kind of environment that I imagine when I read these books, these fields where the flowers are left to grow, and it's really rich and diverse for wildlife. And obviously where you have these havens, you're going to get butterflies and insects and things like the common blue butterfly, which is an absolutely gorgeous butterfly to see, and the skippers there. And it's a really, you know, it's a jungle, like our borders. It's a jungle, but a different type of jungle, you know, a different type. And this is a moth. I kind of just put this picture in there to remind me, an antler moth, that actually there's a lot that we don't even see. So even in these photographs, there'll be moths that we don't see, species of moth. I love to set a moth trap up in these fields in the summer. That would be a fantastic thing to see, the kind of diversity of the moths. And obviously where there's moths, there's bats as well, which we haven't got any photographs of either. So there's a whole load of nocturnal species that we might not see or know about. And where there's moths and insects flying over the fields, you know, we've got these great iconic summer visitors like house martins and swifts hoovering up the insects on over those fields. So it's you know, this circular ecosystem that again serves our resident species and our visiting species as well. And their numbers are in trouble, swifts and house martins and swallows as well. So, you know, we remove that food source, there's even more pressure on these birds. Starlings, and another resident bird that they're kind of quite good. They're quite adaptable. They can eat, they can use the fields to feed, they can eat live insects, and they can forage as well. But there are species that are down 66% in the last, well, since the 1970s. Starlings, and you can see one here. So just demonstrating their flexibility in terms of eating, but this is such an important habitat for those starlings. And a heron. So the heron you will quite often see them in fields, especially if the water's high on the river. They'll come and they'll feed in the fields. They might even eat some of the toads and the frogs. Sorry, Sunday lunch, but they'll come in and feed and use the habitat in the fields as well. I've seen two herons have a fight in the field actually before in the past, which is quite an exciting sight. And more recently, I've been seeing a little egret on the borders, but I haven't got a photo of it. But that's you know, quite a special bird to see as well, an exciting bird to see. The fields are also open to game birds. So we've got a red-legged partridge here, and we've got pheasant as well. And we, you know, it's the thing with pheasants and game birds and things like that. Well, one, they're exciting, and my kids love seeing the pheasants and partridges and things like that. They're mixed. You get a mixed reaction from some people. I think the issue is the fact that each year there's 60 million pheasants released into the wild for shooting purposes. Okay, I'm not judging shooting, by the way, but it's just 60 million birds released. That's what it is. Now, if you start to take away that habitat, that's more pressure on a smaller space. So we were looking at the expansion of Ilkley and Burley, squashing in with the wildlife and introduce birds as well. So it becomes a lot more competitive and a lot less resources. And if we're introducing a vast amount of another species, it becomes quite a challenge, and it can become problematic. And, you know, deer are not a species that are struggling, but I think one of the most powerful things with deer, especially in Burley and Wolfdale, is the connection people make with them. I know the community in Burley and Wolfdale absolutely love seeing these deer, and I do too. And they breed. I've seen I've seen the young come up. There's two youngs with a mum, and that, you know, they evoke a lot of emotion. And I think most people, when they find out about the building site that's going up, will be upset about not seeing these deer. Now, I think the deer will be okay. I think there will be enough area for them to survive. I think it will be sad. I think it will affect us a lot because we will see them a lot less. They will move out maybe into more wooded areas, and we won't see them over these fields. But they are, you know, they're a part of our own well-being. When we go out for walks and we see these roe deer, you know, they evoke a lot of emotions, and they are stunning. It's stunning to be in the presence of deer. They're very flighty as well, you know. So when you're there and they're there carrying on, it's a really special experience. And they have this thick grey coat in the winter, and then when the summer comes, they have this really rich, sort of almost gingery kind of coat, which is absolutely stunning. I really love their summer outfit. It's really, there's a buck there, really beautiful. And they love the long grass as well. They'll quite often hide their young in this long grass to protect them and hide them away. And then when the young grow up, they're just, you know, it's hard not to feel emotions of joy, isn't it, when you see these deer jumping and running around. They have a habit, I don't know whether it's birdie ones, they have the habit of walking around with their and poking their tongue out. Maybe it's just that the developers that are about to build, maybe that's their response. They're getting a message across. But yeah, they're beautiful creatures, and they really do mean quite a lot to our community. Now, a species that's quite close to my heart, I've got a curly jumper on, a really iconic species to Yorkshire, I think, as well as the country. The curlew, this is like, as for the deer, I think they will be all right. The curlew, I am very, very worried about. Actually, I probably should have put that up on the map as well. They nest in these fields, and curlew, they live for about 30 years. The oldest one, the oldest curlews are 20 plus years, but they're quite long-lived birds. But their breeding is really in trouble with really low success rates because of all sorts of pressures. They really are up against it, from agriculture, walking, dogs, cats, all sorts. Their nests are very, very vulnerable. And they're also very site loyal. So they will often nest in the same location that they've nested years and years before. And so there's been no count, so I don't know. I can't get into the fields to see, or I don't know how many curlew nests there are. There are at least a handful, you know, on these fields, and they love this ground because they can sort of see predators coming, and as I said, the land is worked a lot less than in other rural areas, so there's less human disturbance on there. And right about now, you will see these curlews flying overhead and pairing off and starting to breed and lay their eggs and raise their young. And they are a great bird. They're Europe's biggest wader. They're quite a sight to see, hovering over the fields. Really quite a unique shape and really iconic, really. And they're calling out. And one of the things I've seen, I don't know if you can see that, but when they do their really unique call, you can see their throat sort of warble, and it's quite a cool thing to have in a photograph when you can see that call coming out when like that. It's really cool. Like I said, a really iconic shape and really great to watch. Here's a fairly young curlew in a field in the late summer sun, which is you know, a good positive thing. But I do really worry about what this development means for our local curlew. And they're not here just in the spring to breed. They visit in the winter as well. So you'll see them in bigger flocks. We'll get more curlew coming down from Scandinavia and forming bigger flocks, and they will use this area, these fields, for feeding in as well. Now, another ground nester that you also see in large flocks in the winter is lapwings. And watching a large flock of lapwings is a really special experience. They sort of almost glitter and shimmer as they fly in their big flocks. And they really are quite a spectacular sight, you know, not just in big flocks, but when they pair off and when they're performing aerial displays, it's quite remarkable. They're really unique bird. They're quite exciting, and they're ground nesters as well. So they will nest in similar habitats to curlew, and they will nest in these fields, and they're really quite territorial. You'll see them flying up really often, especially when they've got a chick about on the fields. They'll be very defensive. They'll be flying, and they make a really quite sci-fi unique sound, which is just incredible to listen to as they fly around. And you know, it's like something, you know, out of Doctor Who or something. It's a really cool. You can see one yelling out there. It's just brilliant. And they really are quite exciting birds to see. And here's one with a crow interacting with a crow there. You can see the size difference. And obviously where there is ground nesting birds, you will get opportunists and raptors. And the crow is a very opportunistic bird, a very smart and clever bird as well. And we've also got buzzards. Let me check the time, what we're doing. Cool, we're doing good for time. So we got buzzards as well that nest nearby. Actually, I've seen them buzzard nest nearby, not on the site, but nearby. And they'll be constantly being chased off by curlews and lapwings and anything else, crows in fact as well. And we do get red kites flying over as well. I haven't got any pictures of red kites from this site at the moment, but here's the one that they really want to worry about is the sparrowhawk. And I mean, maybe not so much the curlews and the lapwings, but the ambush predator, very efficient predator. And kestrels as well, very good at hunting these well, anything in a field that's small enough for a kestrel to grab, really. Predominantly voles and mice, but they will take chicks as well, kestrels. They're fantastic, beautiful birds. And maybe moving on to, well, certainly something that I really love seeing, and you know, coming from the London suburbs and living on an edge where you can see a barn owl hunting is, I just can't even go, I can't even tell you how much it means to me being able to see this as an adult. You know, I'd never dream I'd be in a place where I could see this from my doorstep and walk out and see a barn owl hunting. And you know, over a few years I've had the odd opportunity to photograph barn owls, and I know that there's at least several different species or different individuals, that's the word, of barn owl that we're looking at. And you can see how exquisite it is, the patterning on the wings, and it's just such a beautiful bird. And you know, just here's one about to pounce here. And the interesting thing to note is looking at the markings. So I was going to tell you a little bit about the how to tell the difference. It's not the easiest thing in the world to tell the difference between a male and a female. And here you go, here's one. But if you look at the body shapes and the markings, you can tell that there are, and the key thing is the rings. So they've been ringed on the talons. You can see this one, some haven't, some have. That's a key indicator, as long as they haven't been ringed in between, that there's different birds visiting this habitat and engaging with it. And here's one, yeah, being chased off by magpies. It's quite a good way of spotting raptors and birds of prey, is to watch for things like magpies. and you know, other birds sort of mobbing them. In the springtime, they'll be mobbed by things like all sorts of birds. Actually, there'll be a big mob of them chasing off. Now, if you can see, hopefully you can see in this picture that we've got a ring on the right hand talon there, which is definitely different from one. There's been one with one. This one has no rings, taken at a very similar time, so it's very unlikely that it got ringed in between. So, and you can see actually the one before is a little bit paler. So there's definitely some different barn owls interacting with this landscape and this habitat, and they they evoke a lot of feelings for me. I just, you know, it's going to be pretty hard. So here you go. Here's a ring on the left talon of this barn owl. And incidentally, one of them I traced back had been ringed in 2012. So that was a very long, I haven't seen it the last year or so, but that's a long-lived bird. Most barn owls live between most successfully bred barn owls live between 4 and 5 years, but there's a high mortality rate with barn owls. Again, that left ring on that talon there as it's flying over, and when you watch them, they'll glide, listening, bring the sound into that disc in their face and channeling it, and then they'll dive down and pounce down and dive on their prey, smother it and catch it. And this is just a shot that I took yesterday. So if you follow me on Facebook, I shared a picture from the back of my camera. I didn't think I'd have enough time to add them to the show, but I did want to show you that this is live and this is now. You know, these aren't just, this is a photograph taken yesterday of a barn owl. Again, there's no ring on the talons here. So this could be a new barn owl to the area potentially. We just don't know. But and also I was going to tell you, so you can see the spots on the flanks, so that's likely, it's not always a given, but that's likely to be a female. If there's no spots, it's more likely to be a male. And there's a few other things you can do. If there's a color under the throat, sort of yellowing under the throat, that can be an indicator of a female as well. So generally the males tend to be paler, they tend to not have these spots on the flanks, but they can do sometimes. So it's not the easiest thing in the world, but that's a rough guide. And here it is again, just coming down. Oh geez, it's just amazing, isn't it? And so while I'm talking about barn owls very quickly, they're great photos. They are a Schedule 1 bird, so it's against the law to disturb or disrupt these birds particularly when they're nesting. So the best thing you can do whenever you see and experience a barn owl is to just stay still and enjoy it. And if you don't disturb them, you're much more likely to have a close encounter anyway. I tend to sort of just stay in the trees or the bushes and find a little gap through and just watch. And they really are just stunning birds to enjoy. And I know that many people in the community really enjoy these local barn owls and are very worried about what's going to happen when these 500 homes go in or start to go up. I think probably, I don't know if I can't remember at the beginning if I explained the situation. I think really, having spoken to some people who've been campaigning, who've been spearheading the campaign, there is not much room left for legal challenges on this space. There's not much room. They've had specialists look at it. So it looks at the moment, unless the planners decide, or unless the development company decide to abandon it for other reasons, it's going to be very hard to challenge and stop that. We've already had an appeal that we won, and now it's been overturned by the Secretary of State. So, you know, in very much, those of us who are, you know, really connected to this area and this bit of greenbelt, we're sort of in a process of grieving, I think, and wondering what can be done, what can we do. And I think, you know, moving forward, we should probably make as much noise about this, about what's happening. We should say, you know, I think whatever happens, we should highlight what's going to be lost, what's going to be left, even if there's no legal routes we can take, we can talk about it and shout about it so everyone knows what is going to be lost. And I think, you know, we live in an age where words are just, you know, they're cheap, you know. Like I hear all the time these sound bites from politicians and councillors about how we need to look after the planet and how we need to do this and protect our environment. You need to stop saying it and you need to do it. You know, you need to do it. This is an example where you can demonstrate what you're saying is what you mean. And I think we need to make sure that people do that, and when they don't, that people know about it as well. And I think more importantly is to inspire other people, our kids and the people around us, about what is right on our doorstep. And I think a lot more people have this since lockdown, and I think they really have connected it and they get it. And it's important that we share those feelings and that connection with this landscape, because if they don't care about it, it's easier to lose it. So we really need to shout about the green spaces local to us that we care about and share that with other people. So like I said, if you share comments, I will be happy to answer them. And thanks so much for joining me on a Sunday morning. It's a really beautiful day, so I hope you get out to enjoy it. I'm going to start winding down here, and thank you very much for your time. And I will hopefully see you around. If you're from the village, I'll see you around the village. Online, I'll see you online. And thank you very much. I forget to look into the camera. Thank you. Enjoy your Sunday.